Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew DeSantis.
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro.
And for a change, we're not previewing the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks, but talking about the Peter Pan Stakes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this race preview of the Peter Pan Stakes here on NYRA Bets. My name is Matthew DeSantis. I'm joined by my trusty colleague, Kaylie Shapiro. Before we get into talking about this prep for the Belmont Stakes, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel. Whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. Kaylie, Kentucky Derby weekend has just ended. We collectively caught our breath for about a half a second. We're already getting ready for the Preakness. And oh, by the way, we got 4 graded stakes races running Saturday at Belmont at the Big A, including the Peter Pan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was super excited when these entries came out. I think it was like the day after the Derby. I was laying in bed and I was telling myself I wasn't going to look at a race, for like 24 hours. And then I saw these entries and I got pretty excited. Definitely see the race a bit differently than I did when I first took a glance. And I think it's pretty wide open. So should have a pretty interesting discussion about it.
Yeah, I think so. And listen, it's obviously there's a lot of news flying around every day about the Preakness, and we have plenty of content here on the channel. Kaylie and I are going to be doing an early preview. We're going to be doing some, post position reactions and getting you ready for the Preakness, the Black Eyed Susan as well. So we're going to have a lot of great content up here on the channel. But like I said, in this week in between, we have great racing taking place up here in New York, and this is a race that has traditionally been used as a stepping stone to the Belmont Stakes for the winner or the second place horse. Last year, obviously, we saw a horse Antiquarian come back and run in the Belmont Stakes, who won this one. So you're right that it is a very wide open race. These are a lot of horses that we've seen knocking around on the Derby trail. Maybe not quite good enough to get into the starting gate of the Derby, but we've seen them in the graded stakes races. And maybe they needed a little bit more time. Maybe they needed a little bit more of a setup. But there are a lot of familiar names, whether it's Captain Cook, Hill Road, Vassimo. I mean, these are names that if you were on the Derby trail, you definitely are familiar with.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's, part of the reason why it's pretty exciting. And then you have some kind of new faces as well that could make some noise in the Belmont, or at least obviously are pointing towards the Belmont. So that's pretty exciting. Definitely, a couple that were probably a notch below those main Derby horses on the trail, but who knows, maybe they've improved and could join right back in with that group. So that's what makes it pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. I think in particular, I think Hill Road is probably a great example of that. A horse that, made one start in 2025 for Chad Brown and obviously showed a lot of talent in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year at Del Mar, making up a ton of ground. Just made that one start. And then Chad kind of sent the horse not to the bench, but just kind of held him out of the Derby trail the rest of the way. It was like, okay, let's give this horse a little bit more time. And now it might be Hill Road's time to shine. But listen, let's dive into this race of 10. And this is going to go off as the last race on the card. So this is one of those true late pick fives where you end with a graded stakes race. There's no, $30,000 maiden claimer on the turf to finish things off in the late pick 5 sequence on Saturday. We are going grade 3, 10 horse field. You will see both Happily Delusional and Lordship. That's a horse I'm going to talk a little bit about. Those two horses do have an asterisk next to their name because they are cross-entered in Saturday's Long Branch Stakes on opening day at Monmouth Park. I think there's a very good chance Happily Delusional goes there. I think there's probably a good chance Lordship does too, but I still think particularly the latter is worth discussing. But listen, this is an interesting race. Like I said, there's some familiar names here. Even a horse like McAfee, who's the half-sibling to Thorpedo Anna, is in this race. And, from a pace standpoint, it's so fascinating because you and I have been looking at these Derby and Oaks races for so long. And Kaylie, almost every single time we do, we look through the past performances, and there's always 2 or 3 horses that have nothing but ones across the running lines. And you go, oh, I know who's going to be on the lead.
Yeah.
This race, there aren't really a lot of horses like that. And it makes the pace scenario a really unknown in a lot of ways.
For sure. Yeah. And definitely at first, when I took a look at this race, I was super bullish on Captain Cook for some reason. I thought this horse was going to take them gate to wire. Just looking at it from a pace perspective, he looks like lone speed. But then as you start digging into it, you see the number 1 Vassimo. I mean, that horse has only won either on or close to the lead, and he drew the 1 hole. So, a horse like that's going to want to go. The number 6, Uncaged, has a little bit of speed as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the dynamics play out. Ultimately, at the end, I was kind of off of Captain Cook because, listen, I mean, Todd Pletcher, he has 2 other horses in here that probably have the other best speed of the group besides Captain Cook. And as much as Todd Pletcher is a great trainer, he's also a pretty good handicapper. So he's definitely at this race and saying, okay, if this Captain Cook gets loose and he's not facing pressure, even if he's facing mild pressure, he has a pretty good shot at taking them gate to wire. I think he's going to have one of these horses either up on the lead or trying to breathe right down Captain Cook's neck. And then in that type of scenario, I don't see Captain Cook as being able to get this distance facing pressure or coming from behind. So that ultimately landed me off of him. But
yeah,
the dynamics are pretty interesting for sure.
They are. And something you and I were talking about off camera was, listen, jockeys and connections and trainers, they look at the past performances too. Mm-hmm. And when they see a race like this where there's no obvious leader in the race, even Captain Cook, who on the numbers is probably the fastest horse in the race if you look at this early pace indicators on Timeform US, even he's not a horse that wants to be on the lead necessarily. He prefers to track the pace, actually. And so, even a horse like that, you have to wonder if Rick Dutrow Jr. actually doesn't want him on the lead. Could he get lost on the lead potentially? Does he like running out of target and, having something to run at, rather than being up there on the front end? You know that as well as I do, that some horses, when they get up on the lead, they kind of get distracted. They lose their focus. They lose their attention. And, I don't know what type of horse Captain Cook is in that regard. So, it's so interesting that even the horse I think you and I both assumed might be lone speed might not even want to be lone speed. So it makes it that much more complicated. And like you said, Todd Pletcher's looking at this, Chad Brown's looking at this, and listen, they're not going to let Captain Cook just go gate to wire. So you'd imagine Irad Ortiz Jr. on the inside of the Vassimo or Kendrick Carmouche with Uncaged is going to want to send. And sometimes races that don't look like they'll have any pace ends up with a lot of pace. And sometimes, as we know from handicapping turf races in New York, races that look like they have a lot of pace end up having no pace. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out at the break and how they end up going into the first turn. But yeah, I agree with you. You figure Vassimo has to be pretty forward in this spot, even if he's just closely tracking. But I think that inside rail might really kind of beg the question that he has to send.
You'd imagine. I kind of drew a line through those 2 starts of Vassimo, the Louisiana Derby and the Risen Star. I mean, when you look at it, this horse, like I said, in his first 2 starts, both of them his only wins. He was either close to the lead up on the pace in both of those starts. And then in the Risen Star, I mean, everyone kind of had a funky trip that day. Was tired chasing Magnitude. Obviously, ran like a 108 that day. And then Louisiana Derby, he just kind of ran in a straight line. And what stuck out to me is that that's the longest prep we have. Now he's cutting back. I think that we might see something similar to what we saw from him in his first 2 starts, where he was close to the pace. And obviously drawing the 1 hole probably puts that pressure on just a little bit more to be forwardly placed. So
yeah, absolutely. You figure Irad is obviously going to be a pretty smart rider with this one. And Captain Cook, we should say, listen, I know, you and I both share skepticism on Captain Cook in terms of his ability to get the distance of a mile and an eighth. And people would say, well, but Matthew and Kaylie, he already won going a mile and an eighth at the Withers. Yes, but I would say yes, but the quality of that field is not nearly what he's facing on Saturday. And then yes, but they also went 49 and change and 113 and change to the half mile and 6 furlong mark. I don't necessarily see them doing that again. So yes, if they give him those fractions, he can probably get a mile and an eighth. But if they go the fractions like they did in the Wood Memorial when Rodriguez was leading him around the track and you saw what happened, Captain Cook faded well back. So, like you, I was trying to beat Captain Cook. We used it in a couple of different ways. You ultimately went to Chad Brown's horse, Hill Road, as your top selection in this race, a horse that I kind of made mention to. Talk a little bit more about this one and what attracted you to this runner.
I think stretching out to the mile and an eighth is really going to help him. I know he could be a little bit pace dependent. And if, they're getting slow fractions on Saturday, it's not really going to help his case. But this horse has still been able to put together some pretty good efforts in his only 2 starts here in America with some pretty slow fractions as well, especially the Tampa Bay Derby. I mean, they went 48 and changed to the half that day. I think it's pretty good chance that you see something similar on Saturday, and at the off chance that maybe they do go a little bit faster than they did at the Tampa Bay Derby, that moves him up just a little bit more in my mind. But I definitely think that getting to stretch out to a mile and an eighth is going to help this horse out a lot. I think in the Tampa Bay Derby, I mean, he ran a better race than Chancer McPatrick did that day, in my opinion. They were both chasing Lone Speed and Owen Almighty, who we saw ran back pretty well in the Kentucky Derby. And then, Hill Road, I think, came from further back than Chancer McPatrick did that day. That was the day Chancer was sitting pretty close, and he didn't really run that well. I think Hill Road ran a better race that day. I mean, this horse has the best late kick of this entire group, and, has finished in the money in both of his starts here with some pretty slow paces. So I think stretching out in distance might be this horse's friend, and I landed on him on top. I think, you're probably going to get a pretty good price on him as well. I imagine he'll be like second or third choice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, we'll see. David Aragona has yet to release the morning lines, and then we'll see obviously how the public decides to bet this race. But yeah, listen, I think he makes a lot of sense. And as I mentioned, he is a horse that he's getting blinkers for the second time. He got blinkers for the first time in that Tampa Bay Derby. Didn't really affect his running style. He was still sitting, like you said, a little further back. I'd be interested, maybe second time blinkers. Maybe he's sitting a little bit more mid-pack, doesn't give himself as much to do in that race. Might be a little bit more intentionality to get him into a more of a mid-pack position, just so he's not having to make up too much ground coming around the turn with the questionable pace scenario here. But yeah, he makes a lot of sense, and clearly very intentional from Chad that to ship this horse up to Belmont after that Tampa Bay Derby for training. So this was always kind of the next target, I think, after that. And that speaks well.
Yeah, because you'd imagine this horse obviously is targeting the Belmont. So this is like that stepping stone for him, but he definitely has been training pretty well at Belmont leading up to this. I honestly wouldn't be too shocked if we saw him sitting a little bit closer than we usually do. And maybe Chad tries to change up the tactics similar to what he did with Chancer McPatrick and has him sitting a little bit closer. I don't think that he'll be that close, but in my mind, I imagine, Captain Cook, Vassimo, and Uncaged probably tracking the pace, and maybe Hill Road right behind Uncaged sitting a little bit closer. So that should help him out too.
Absolutely. Flavian Pratt up on the mount for Hill Road. I'm going to go with a little bit of a longer shot in the number 6 Uncaged for Todd Pletcher, kind of Todd's other horse in this race. Always a horse I liked a lot. And I remember this one debuting back at Saratoga last summer, and actually debuted in a race with a pair of eventual stakes winners. I Got Game, who won the Ozark Stakes back in February, and then Cyclone State, who, of course, we remember won the Jerome here in New York. And so beat both of those horses in debut, came back, went to the bench for 7 months, came back in a 6 furlong race and finished 4th. But then last time out, stepped up, stretched out to a mile and ran really well despite having some significant problems out of the gate, kind of hopped out, went to the right or left, I guess I should say, bumped into his inside horse, and then really got pinched back between runners and pushed back to last place, managed to make a nice run to get there. I think what impressed me about that was just the maturity of it in only a 3rd career start. And also, he's sired by Curlin. He's going to want to go a lot longer than this. So I think distance is absolutely going to be his friend. That 6 furlong race off the bench just feels like one that Todd wanted just to knock some rust off. And so I don't really take that much credence into like how he ran that day. I think it was much more about how he ran in that mile. And I think moving forward, he's going to be a little bit more forward in some of his races. The one thing I will say, people will look at his running lines and go, well, his 2 wins have come over wet tracks. Fair point. I will say I went back and consulted our colleague Andy Serling's track trends and looked at both of those days. Both days were playing fair. So while it was a wet track, it was a fair track on both days that he was running. And it was also a muddy track. And I think that's an important distinction to make is it was nice weather, actually, both days he ran. It had rained earlier. It was clear. It was nice. The track was drying out. It wasn't as if it was this like sloppy mess where it's just terrible weather and all this stuff. So I think, he's a horse, I think, that can replicate these efforts on a fast track and maybe even move forward. So I think Uncaged, again, taking a little bit of a shot, to your point, should be sitting that tracking trip and get first crack at a horse like Captain Cook. If he's not able to get the distance. Vassimo's a horse I like. I think he's going to be, like you said, probably second choice potentially in this race behind Captain Cook. And that's one that you like quite a bit on the inside with Irad, a horse that obviously has faced significantly better competition during his time on the Derby Trail.
Yeah, definitely. But Uncaged that horse is definitely going on my ticket. I don't think this is like a single or even like a two horse on the ticket.
This is spread race.
I think this is I use 3 or 4 horses, honestly. Probably the ones in my top 4, but you're the number 6 Uncaged. Definitely when you take a first glance at his past performances, it looks like his only good efforts come over off tracks. But yeah, I definitely noted the same thing you did. And then I read your write-up, I think earlier in the day, and saw that you noted that the track was fair. So that definitely makes this horse a bit interesting. I don't think the wins have anything to do with the off track. And obviously this horse is definitely going to improve with that at distance based on the pedigree. So I think this one obviously is going to have himself in a good position in the race as well. That should help him out. So yeah, that's definitely a pretty logical option if you're looking past your morning line favorite. And the number 1 Vassimo as well. I thought because he's going to be pretty forwardly placed, obviously, like we talked about earlier. And this horse has a really good foundation is honestly why I put a lot of weight on him. Obviously has faced different caliber of horses a bit, but also is a horse that, obviously he's facing a different caliber of horses, but also has been going the distance, and the distance is further. So that the distance is going to be no issue, and he should be pretty dead fit cutting back today as well on Saturday. So you would
think. Vassimo, he makes a lot of sense on the inside. He's going to save all the ground too, right? He's on the inside rail. Irad's going to get him out there in a forward position, whether he's on the lead or tracking the lead, but he's going to be, saving ground, going 2 turns. And like you said, I think you can cross the line through the last time out because he just didn't get into his normal position. The race before that, Magnitude freaked, and, everybody finished well back that day. And so, it's important to remember when you see that margin of defeat in that Risen Star, the second place horse was beat by 9 3/4 lengths. So it's not as if it was this blowout of a race. It was a super strung out field. It was Magnitude a mile ahead of everybody and then everybody else. So, he was competitive with the other horses in that race, I thought, in that Risen Star. So, listen, he makes a lot of sense with Irad aboard. Now, listen, we should probably talk a little bit about the presumptive morning line favorite, Captain Cook. You and I are both playing against him. And I think in some ways on my tickets, I might go 3 or 4 deep and try to just beat Captain Cook in this particular race and just try to get past him and use a few more horses to try to do it. Use the Vassimo, who might not be in my top 4, but I think does stand a real chance. But listen, we got to give Captain Cook some credit because he came in here and won the Withers back in February, that was. And so, listen, it ran a 94 buyer speed figure. Last time out ran a 91 in the Wood Memorial. But again, ran against 2 really good horses, Rodriguez and Grande. Grande was my Derby pick, a long shot I really liked. And Rodriguez might be your favorite or second choice in the Preakness next week, depending on who ends up going to that race.
Yeah, definitely. The logical way to play your ticket if you're playing against him is to leave him off, especially if you have 3 other horses that you feel like you can trust, which is probably what I'm going to try to do. The only thing that does scare me a little bit is if this horse is able to take them gate to wire. But like I said, I really just don't see the possibility of that when other people are looking at this race, like Todd Pletcher. I really just do not think he's going to let that happen. So I honestly think it's pretty logical to try to play against Captain Cook here. I'd rather be wrong than include him for an unnecessary reason. I just don't have faith in him getting this distance under the circumstances that I think he's going to face, either facing pressure or, having to come from off the pace too, which he likes to do. I don't see it happening for him against this.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's it's a horse that is a little fascinating in that he's a practical joke with some Indian Charlie influence underneath. Physically, I remember you and I looking at him in the paddock before the Wood Memorial that day. He doesn't quite, it was funny. In the Withers, I thought he looked really good in the paddock, and he looked good as well in the Wood. Not to say he didn't look good, but you could tell the difference between a horse like him and Rodriguez, where you could tell a horse like Rodriguez was a genuine two-turn horse. And you look at Captain Cook and you go, 1 turn mile. Like, you just go, he's not quite built like the traditional two-turn horses. And so you can get the mile and an eighth under the right circumstances when you're going really slow. But I'm like you. I think he's going to have trouble getting this distance with this caliber of competition, either chasing him or him chasing them. And so we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But you're right. The possibility is out there that he goes gate to wire and just, it takes him all the way around. But I have a hard time thinking the fact that Pletcher's got both the other main pace horses in the race, that's going to happen.
Yeah, me too. So definitely going to try to play against him here. But I think what's interesting as well is I can even make a case. You can make a case for some weird horses in here. Like you included a logical closer like McAfee, obviously the half to Thorpedo Anna, who hasn't really run a poor race. But, I think that we're just going to see the same thing from. I don't think there's a big reason to believe that the horse is going to improve. I just don't really see it. The horse.
I think the big thing with McAfee is
as good as the horse is going to get. Which is what I'm kind of thinking based on, what we've seen so far. But you can make a case for some, weird horses in here, in my opinion, like even the Surfside Moon. That's a closer. That horse has closed ran his best race exactly, at Aqueduct. I think a 90 buyer speed figure, same distance, same race. And that horse didn't have that much pace to close into. And that horse ran a pretty good race, I thought, that day. Obviously,
he really
second to Captain Cook. So that's a sneaky one, honestly, if you're looking for a long shot or a horse. And that may not make the most sense on paper, even though I think he does. I mean, he ran his best race this exact trip. So,
yeah, I think you're right. And hey, picks up Kentucky Derby winning jockey Junior Alvarado. That's not such a bad thing. No, Surfside Moon, did close into that pace at the Withers. That was rather paceless, and even came back next time out and ran in that Federico Tessio, which I thought I thought that was a good race. I mean, the horse Pay Billy, who's going to be running in the Preakness, is a perfectly fine horse. And that was also off about a 2.5 month layoff too. So now you're second back from that layoff. And this one, could be sitting a pretty good trip, maybe more of a tracking trip as well, mid-pack. With McAfee, listen, the reason I included that horse deeper underneath is that's kind of how I view the horse, as more of a kind of an underneath play in this regard. And the big thing is the equipment change. Rick Dutrow Jr. putting on blinkers for McAfee. This is a horse that usually gave himself too much to do coming from well back in the field. If you put the blinkers on, now there's a potential that this horse maybe gets away a little bit more quickly, is able to sit more of a mid-pack trip and not give himself so much to do. And one thing I will say is this is a horse that has gotten progressively faster every single race of his career from a buyer speed figure standpoint. 64, 74, 82, 89 last time out. So he can absolutely run some, he's been improving. And the question is there another level to him? I don't know if there is necessarily, but the blinkers on is an equipment change that's a plus move for Rick Dutrow Jr. And again, I think you could just see a little bit of a better trip for McAfee than you might normally under these, coming from all the way in the back. Because you're right, if he and Hill Road are at the back of the pack together, I trust Hill Road a heck of a lot more than I trust McAfee for a variety of reasons. So in addition to, McAfee, and you and I know this, and we've talked about it before, has been a vet scratch a couple of times throughout his career. So him just even running in this race is still a bit of a question mark, though it is promising to see that he's a regular on the work tab coming out of that Wood Memorial. It looks like he's, healthy and moving well at this point.
Yeah, which is honestly a pretty good sign, because if I'm not mistaken, I think leading up to the Wood Memorial, I need to look further back, but I think leading up, pretty consistent. What looks like leading up to the Wood Memorial. But I think honestly, all this horse has to do is run back a similar race as he did in the Wood Memorial, to get fourth here. So definitely logical. No reason to genuinely believe the horse won't improve. Clearly has been in every start. So I think it's a pretty interesting race. Definitely when you think about even how they're going to be placed. I mean, that definitely is going to depend on how you see the race, but it should be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, the last horse I want to mention is the number 10 Lordship for Chad Brown. This is a horse that likely is going to go to the Long Branch, but I wanted to at least give this horse a mention in this race. And listen, if he runs in the Long Branch, a horse like Vassimo obviously moves up in my eyes, and so the one would come onto my top four. Absolutely. It probably would actually leapfrog McAfee, so I'd probably end up going something like 6-8-1-5 or something along those lines in terms of my top four. But I wanted to give this horse a little bit of a shout. This is the full sibling to the horse Hall of Fame, who, of course, we just saw run third in the Ali Sheba down at Churchill Downs this past weekend behind a record-breaking performance from Fierceness. And before that, we saw this horse pick up a grade 3 victory at Fairgrounds. So Hall of Fame's a legitimate horse. This one's the full sibling to that one. And this horse had a little bit of a trouble at the start in that Tampa Bay Derby, hopped out of the gate and was kind of behind horses early. I thought made a really professional move, got to the top of the stretch. He was obviously your betting line favorite at Tampa Bay Downs. And I think there's always a little bit of a question of how good are Chad's horses that he debuts on the dirt at Tampa Bay Downs. And I think that's legitimate. But here's the thing. He's had success stepping horses up in their second starts in these types of spots before going long on the dirt. You saw a horse like Early Voting go from breaking his maiden to winning a graded stakes. You saw a horse like Sierra Leone go from winning a debut to then running that very famous second to Dornoch in the Remsen, his second start. So you've seen Chad have success with it. That said, it usually is when he's got the really strong favorite, which is probably going to be more of the case down at Monmouth in the Long Branch. So that's why I think he'll end up down there. But he is an interesting horse, and if you're playing the Long Branch, use that one up top. That's my top pick. So I'll give it a little shot there.
I didn't read or see your Long Branch analysis yet, but when I was looking at this race, I was like, wow, I hope this horse goes there, because honestly, it looks like the winner in that race. So that was really the only reason I didn't include him. I saw him as the clear winner of the Long Branch a little bit. So, but looking forward to playing him there if he ends up there.
Sense.
But if not, then definitely, honestly, even deserves a second look, maybe even in this field, if he does end up going. So
and he's a horse that has every opportunity to improve from a buyer speed figure standpoint. Should appreciate the stretch out in either instance. But listen, I think from a Chad standpoint, it makes sense that if you think about it, he's got these three dirt horses in terms of Lordship, Hill Road, and Chancer. Now, Chancer, he's already said, is cutting back to one turn. So Chancer presumably is going to be on the 1 turn mile, 7 furlong circuit this summer at Saratoga. Then you have a horse like Lordship. If he goes to the Long Branch, then he's probably going to run in the Pegasus on Haskell Preview Day and be pointed towards the Half-sibling Stakes in New Jersey. And then you have Hill Road. If Hill Road runs well in this race, he's going to be pointed towards the Belmont, and that means he's going to be pointed towards the big boy races like the Jim Dandy and the Travers in Saratoga. So this way he's got his three horses on the dirt, and they're all doing three different things at three different levels. So
I imagine, and then
how you manage that.
Yeah, and then I imagine maybe Jeramond to the Preakness, if I'm not mistaken. I guess Kaylie, we'll find out, but definitely interesting.
Kaylie, I don't know. Antonio Venice might be running in the Preakness. I don't know who's going to be running in the Preakness. I just picked that one because I know you always like Antonio Venice. But listen, it's going to be a wide open race. Kaylie sees it 4-1, 6-8. I see it 6-8, 10, 5 with the understanding that if the 10 scratches, I'll go 6-8, 1-5. But listen, it is, like I said, a fun race. Can't wait to kind of dive into it, see it there, obviously, at the track on Saturday, along with all the other great races. The Ruffian, that's a loaded race. The Man of War, you got Farbridge coming back. So a lot of great races at Aqueduct on Saturday, so make sure to play. Kaylie, you're going to be joining me for like a little bit of a Preakness preview a little bit later this week. Early look at it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm excited for that. Kentucky Derby's over, but I mean, jumping right into more excitement now between Peter Pan. Obviously, Saturday is going to be a great day at Aqueduct, and next weekend as well. So excited.
Absolutely. I will say, somebody in the comments on YouTube, I got to give him a shout out, said, has everybody done a wellness check on Kaylie after Sovereignty Scratch is deciding to skip the Preakness? They wanted to make sure you were doing okay, because that's your horse, and they were very worried in a genuine way. They were very worried to make sure you were doing all right. So
I trust in Belmont. Whatever Belmont believes is the best thing to do, that's the best thing to do. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy for it. I'm glad they're going to protect the horse. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a likely chance that we see that horse dominate the Belmont, and then I think that he'll probably go to maybe Dubai or something. I think
he'll probably run the Travers and things like that.
And then
finish out his year, and then next
as a
year
long-term goal. But I see him maybe as that type of horse, so that's equally as exciting.
That'd be very exciting. We love that. And Bill, usually tries to have his horses run at 4 or 5 years old. So, we'll see. Obviously this one, he's got to have a huge stud deal whenever he decides to retire and step away from the track. But listen, it's still going to be a great week of racing up here. Going to be a great month of racing, a great year of racing between the Triple Crown, Saratoga, and the Breeders' Cup. So for Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.